Welcome, everybody. Excited to be doing this. I think we should do this more often because the exercise of prepping this was, I think, pretty useful. And hopefully the content will be useful to all of you as well. I think we take our partnerships with our customers and partners really seriously. And I want to be, the best partner we can be. And I think, communicating proactively about kind of what we've recently shipped and how that affects you and what is on our roadmap and kind of where we're going is a good part of that. So that is my goal for today's webinar. So we'll do some intros, cover a demo of new platform features. We'll talk about our coverage and a little bit about what our roadmap looks like, as well as the digital ID portal. And then talk a little bit about the roadmap from a platform point of view. So we'll talk both about the roadmap on our coverage and roadmap on the platform, and then do some Q&A at the end. So as you listen, feel free to drop questions in the Q&A or chat or whatever, and we can answer those at the end. Okay, so to start off, you've got me, Michael, and Zach. I'm the CEO. Michael is our other co-founder and chief product officer, and Zach is here covering product partnerships with, mostly working with all the digital IDs around the world to get them integrated into the Trinsic platform. So, our goal as Trinsic, not just in the webinar, is to really expand the pie as it relates to the identity verification market. And I think as AI gets better and better, more businesses will need to verify their users. They will want to do it at a higher level of assurance, and consumers will, whether by fatigue or otherwise, expect more frictionless experiences. And I think digital IDs are critical to making that happen. And as Trinsic, I want us to be the best partner we can be in helping to, make that a reality for you and your customers. I think, we've made this slide like, I don't know, long time ago. So many of you have probably seen it, but it still rings true to me that document verification is a market worth billions of dollars. And the process is, not frictionless, right? It takes at least dozens of seconds to get through a flow like that. And you need to have be in the optimal circumstances in terms of having your document close by and things like that. And I think what digital IDs to me represent is that we can go to a world where, when it's 10 times faster to prove your identity, I think 10 times more, like proving who you are in a high assurance way will be applicable in 10 times more places or more. And we've seen this in other markets when it got 10x easier to hail a ride, right? The taxi market grew 10x or something, right? And with Uber and Lyft and ride sharing and things like that. And the same pattern happens over and over. And this is, to me, clearly happening right now. And so I want to share just a brief, many of you have probably seen this, but for those of you who haven't, I'm going to skip over a few things. This is, one of you on the call is the, identity verification vendor to Jewel, and wanted to share this, live deployment of digital IDs and sort of what it looks like. Jewel has embedded, Trinsic. Jewel is not Trinsic's customer, right? Trinsic works with the identity verification company that works with Jewel. And, this is a good example of what digital ID acceptance looks like out in the wild. As a user, I get to this screen. There's been some orchestration that's been done in the background to know that this user is coming from California. And so they see the California MDL here. And the user can either upload a picture of their document and selfie or use one of these digital IDs. And using the digital ID is, by the time the button's clicked, let's start from here, by the time the deep link button is clicked to the time that the user authenticates to the MDL wallet, clicks accept, and is redirected back to the page where they came from, it's a 10-second process, right? And this is even, in a demo where we're not necessarily, clicking through it as fast as possible or whatever. And these are the types of experiences that we want to power and power it across whatever geographies you operate in and or your customers operate in, right? And from mobile driver's licenses to EIDs in Europe, bank IDs, reusable ID wallets, government ID databases, etc. And so this is like a crazy slide. So don't need to like read all the words on this or like memorize everything that's here. But the key takeaway that I want to share is that there are really three layers that we think about at Trinsic. The first layer is this digital ID aggregation, right? This is what most people think of us as, but it's not actually most of what we do, but it's a very important part of what we do because coverage is super important. This is where the coverage comes from. And so you can see here, in this baseline, on the right-hand side, we have some standards, right? So there's technology standards that you need to integrate in order to accept certain digital IDs. And while there are some standards that allow you to accept some digital IDs, there's a lot of variance within that, and there's proprietary schemes and things like that as well to cover. And then on the left-hand side here, you'll see that we have what I've been calling recently an ID provider licensing marketplace, where like you don't need to contract directly with the ID provider themselves, right? You can get a sub license or a reseller license or whatever from Trinsic, who has procured the right to grant you that license. And so, that saves a bunch of time when that's possible. And it's also true that that's sometimes not possible, or your organization may want to have a direct relationship with Apple or Google or SingPass or the UK government or whatever the case may be. And when that's the case, that's fine too, right? We don't need to be the one that licenses you the legal right to offer it in your product. We can still power the acceptance through the standards that we support and the ID acceptance platform, and you can sort of plug in your existing license, your existing credentials, your existing stuff there, and it'll still work seamlessly throughout the platform. Okay, so that's the digital ID aggregation layer. We've got more than 50 providers in 35 countries now, and we have people who license things from us directly, and also cases where people have their own relationships that they can bring into the platform and plug in seamlessly. On top of that, we have this ID acceptance platform, and this is like the software layer on top of the aggregation that enables you to easily adopt and scale digital IDs. Even little things like an API to allow you to allow list redirect URLs or something, right? It's like, this is not something that like most people, like we talk about in sales calls or most people think about or something, right? But it's there are so many little pain points that come along with adopting digital IDs, and so many things that you need to build to make it enterprise grade, right? If you want to write a documentation site for a digital ID, you want to know what are all the data attributes that come from this. And then when Apple Wallet introduces a new credential type, like they did earlier this week or last week or whatever, I can't remember, we will update our sort of schema API, call it the provider contracts API, with this new SKU that's available through Apple Wallet. And now you can sort of update your documentation site in real time by integrating with that API, for example, right? So like I could go deep into all these different bullets here and all the different things we do to make it easy to adopt and scale. And we'll talk more about some of those platform features that we're building right now. But suffice it to say that this sitting on top of the digital ID aggregation is the majority of our work goes into building the software layer that makes it easy for you to adopt and scale digital IDs. And then on top of all of that, we want to be an extension of your team and work with you closely to make sure that you succeed, because our success is dependent on the success of our partners. We made an explicit decision to focus on a certain type of go-to-market that requires us to be really dependent on making partnerships successful. And so we are really incentivized to make that work. And so we have, we want to help you with all the pain points from, getting intelligence about digital IDs that are not supported yet or are on their way, like the EUDI wallets and EIDAS 2.0 stuff that doesn't really exist yet, but is coming and you need to have answers to it. Well, we want to help with that. Acceptance testing, right? We have people in countries around the world who are able to test these deployments before you go live with them or before your customers do. Sales enablement material, activation and white labeling and configuration and co-marketing and all these things. Like we want to help where we can, to make you successful. So those are the three layers that we sort of think about. I am going to speak briefly to the sort of history of digital ID aggregation in Trinsic right now, and then I'm going to hand it over to Michael to talk about the new platform updates for this middle layer. So this is a kind of look at what we've done over the last year and the integrations that we've added support for in the last sort of 12 months, and then we have in 2024 kind of Q4 and the earlier part of 2024 as well here shown. And hopefully this illustrates that like we are very we're diligently sort of integrating new ID providers as they come online, both ID providers with deep penetration and adoption like SPID, which has tens of millions of users in Italy and is well adopted and used there, to things like Oddkenny, which is the digital ID in Iceland, which like I didn't or FADA, which is the digital ID in Ethiopia, right? These are not digital IDs that were initially at the top of our priority list until we had customers who need them. And so, we prioritize our roadmap based on customer demand, and we'll happily integrate with digital IDs that are the sort of long tail alongside ones that are maybe at the top of the list, like Apple Wallet and Google Wallet. I think the last thing I'll say is this is happening, right? It's working. People, many of you on the call here have gone live with customers and are rocking and rolling, and it's growing fast. So as these things start working, we are really, really consciously aware of how quickly we think that this can grow, and how quickly we think you can deploy this across your customer base. And so now, Michael, I hand it over to you to talk about what are the things we're doing to help scale digital IDs and make this accelerate growth and revenue growth for our partners.
Perfect.
So,
thanks, Riley.
Yeah, let me stop sharing and you can go ahead and share.
Awesome. Hope everyone's doing well today. It's lovely to see people on the call that I've spoken with this week. So glad you can all be here with us. We've put a lot of time and effort over the last couple of months into thinking about how specifically like we can provide an abstraction on top of digital identities so that people around the world can use them without needing to like build all of the different layers that Riley mentioned himself. So let me just share this. I'm having trouble with Google Slides. So 1 second. There we go. Hopefully, yeah, it looks like you can all see my screen. So the first platform feature that we've built as an abstraction on top of all the digital IDs around the world are verification profiles. Many of you have seen this demo or talked with us about it before, but for those who haven't, I'll go through right now and show you what a verification profile looks like, both in the dashboard and in our API. So this is the Trinsic dashboard. I've signed in as Trinsic to our dashboard, which is where many of you have probably seen demos of companies like Pocket Rides, Airbnb. I also have Praxis Auth, which is an example of an OEM partner. So this would be a company that specifically is providing an identity solution to a variety of different end customers. And our verification profiles are meant to set up unique configurations of branding and identity provider setups specifically for a use case for an end customer. So if we look at Pocket Rides here, Pocket Rides has a verification profile with their branding, a customized data redaction period, a custom domain name that can be set up. We can then go through and select the different identity providers for this profile. And the ones I have here have been already added and then enabled. I can then go through and enable and disable other digital identities for this customer. Probably have to refresh that so it shows up. And then when I go through and add providers, I can then sort these providers. I guess what we're currently adding right now is the ability to look through and see the different digital IDs that you can enable for an end customer. And then we are currently adding the ability to sort these based on the data scopes that each of these provide back, as well as the geography. So you can be setting up different digital identities for different end customers with specific branding and data scopes. Now, this is great to do for your first couple of customers in our dashboard. We've also made this possible to create a kind of default configuration for your organization where you can brand things as Praxisoth, and then go through and onboard end customers to some sort of default brand. Now, obviously, we would love to make this customizable with the branding and the data scopes for each end customer, potentially all of your end customers. And to do that, we need this to be done through an API. So we've added a verification profile API where you can create, list, and fetch the different profiles of your organization. You can actually do this through our interactive docs. It is an alpha API, and as I was doing this, I realized there are a couple of challenges with URL encoding in our docs site. So you can do this through curl and also through our SDKs. I have a curl command here that will make a post request to our verification profiles API. And if the demo gods are in my favor, when I click enter here, we should get back a profile ID. And this just created a verification profile on Praxisoth for Faber Bank with a lovely like cobalt blue primary color, and providers based in the US. So we have California Wallet, Clear, Apple, Google, Samsung, and then Louisiana Wallet enabled now. Then if I go to our docs and list this verification profile, or get this verification profile here, oops, let's copy this. Then we can see this configuration with the ID and the enabled providers. If I go into the dashboard, I should see now, actually, I think I made this as part of Trinsic. Let me just confirm. Yep. I should see now Faber. Let's see, we have a lot of profiles here. So I'll search for this. There we go, Faber Bank. And we, by default, enable the providers that don't require any customization manually. So LA Wallet, Samsung Wallet just ask for a display name, which we can take from the profile details that you show here. Clear and Google both ask for us to provide a demo video. And so we disable these by default. And then we are currently reaching out through Slack to enable these with the information that's required. And we're adding additional information into the dashboard, which I can show just briefly here. We have environments now within our Trinsic dashboard. So you can go through a test environment and have a list of test verification profiles for your organization. As you can see with Trinsic, our developers have been able to use this to do a variety of different tests, of different like integration tests and other tests for all the engineers we can add them to both the live and test environment, um, or just a test environment, depending on how your customer data is set up. If I'm inviting a new engineer and want to invite them, I can invite them as just a member of only test, and they will not have any access to production data. So these environments have allowed us to fulfill some of our customers' requests to provision role-based authentication based on environments. And then for the profiles that are in test environment, we can go through and have a variety of Trinsic mock providers, which will model the 6 different interaction methods of a digital identity. Of the 63 ones that we have available, I think I need to be on mobile for this. We have 6 different ways of launching a digital identity. And these mock providers show like a PIN code or a QR code. And then they also show like just a redirect if a provider uses a redirect. All right, to finish up here, yeah, this is the redirect flow. So your engineers can test really easily, get back a standardized data object. You can then demo as well using a test credential in a variety of these digital identities that offer test credentials. And so this is a great way in a test environment to showcase a demo, and then to showcase a different kind of digital identity for a different customer. And then when you go live with customized branding here, you can then showcase all of these with real credentials in its own separate environment with custom branding for your end customer. To finish up, and this will lead into our coverage and our roadmap, we are currently building what we like to call internally the ultimate provider dashboard, because all of you on the call ask us really hard questions about digital identities. And we love answering those questions because it helps us get better and better data about all of the world of digital IDs. So much so that I believe we now get cited as a source in places that we're surprised to be cited as a startup. But we're really happy and proud of the coverage that we have globally of digital identities, not only in our API and our platform, but also in the information on each of these digital identities. So you've probably gone through and seen the somewhat sparse documentation we have on our doc site. We are currently in the process of adding what we have in our digital ID portal right into our dashboard. And I'll hand it over to Zach now to talk more about that digital ID portal, which I'm sure most of you have seen at some point. We've made some updates there. Zach can talk more about our coverage and also what's coming next for our network. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Great. So as a reminder, if folks have questions, you can throw them in the Q&A, and we plan to get to them kind of at the end of the webinar. So if you have things that come up while you're watching, again, feel free to drop them in the Q&A section here in Zoom. So just get my screen share going on. So I'm going to talk, I lead the product partnerships here at Trinsic, which means working with the identity providers that we integrate into our network. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like coverage and roadmap updates coming in, the next year or so in 2026. It's going to be a big year for digital identity with a lot of significant shifts happening in many of like the key global markets. So mobile driver's licenses are maturing across the US and Australia, and then other geographies as well, enabling remote verification, which will make the MDLs much more valuable or easy to use in like an onboarding scenario rather than just for an in-person use case like TSA. So right now in the US, there is some adoption of remote verification, but that'll be a lot more widespread next year. And also Australia, most of the states we believe will be live with remote verification in 2026. So that'll be a big shift. With the EUDI wallets, there will be a lot of news and announcements about new wallets, integrations, and like live credentials being issued next year as well. So that's going to be a big trend that we'll talk about more. And then again, there's a lot of government EIDs, like government applications launching across the Middle East and Asia, launching, maturing, opening up to the private sector, which we'll talk about in the roadmap section as well. Um, One quick illustration, I think this was published by the Digital ID Observatory in Milan a couple weeks ago or a week or two ago, just about the state of EUDI and kind of which member states in the EU have announced a wallet, what the wallet is called, what the state of the wallet is. A lot of these, any of this, you know, countries that are green have some working wallet application that is kind of like the precursor to their EUDI wallet. It doesn't support the right protocols and functionality and remote verification that they're meant to in the EIDAS 2 kind of framework, but they have wallets that are kind of getting out there into the hands of the public with some limited functionality, ability to hold documents, and then those will be updated and mature over the next year or so. Um, so I want to spend more time here in what Michael mentioned is our digital ID portal or the Market Intelligence Hub. So we've done a lot of work updating the roadmap section here. So essentially you have an understanding of like what we're looking at for next year and what we're tentatively planning on, being able to integrate or add to the platform. So within this roadmap section, we have it broken out by region or continent. Um, Obviously, there's some challenge in projecting exactly when an integration will be able to go live because right now, certain like states or countries don't necessarily announce when their wallet application will be live and ready to go. So we've done our best kind of guessing and documenting the things that we're aware of and expect to go live at a certain time next year. So, for example, like all of the Australian provinces or states we believe will be launching digital driving license applications. They may have different names or update or support other types of wallets, but we're tracking all of these things here and plan to support them through our support of ISO 18013-7, which is the remote verification, set of standards for mobile driver's licenses, which they have publicly stated that they will support. Um, Similar story across the US, where there's a number of state-specific mobile ID applications that we're aware of that will be enabling support for remote verification in 2026. A lot of those are mentioned and tracked here. Um, a few other schemes we're looking at across Canada as well. Um, there are a number of digital ID applications that we're also looking at in the Middle East and in Asia. Um, a lot of these are actually primarily developed for government service authentication. So there is actually pretty widespread adoption of some of the applications, but some of the like registration requirements are quite challenging to work around, unless you have like a local entity within that geography, for example. So there's a little bit of some like TBD around when they'll be open to integration or when we'll be able to be live. But we're tracking a number of these across the region. Um, a lot to talk about in the EU because there are, like we showed in the illustration before, there are a lot of existing wallets and EID schemes that Trinsic already supports. So those aren't shown in the roadmap section because this is all future facing. I'll show those in just a second. But then there are a lot of upcoming wallets that Trinsic plans to support through the EUDI kind of set of standards and protocols, and we will be registering in order to be like a wallet relying party against some of these. These are all in varying states. So something like Mobiwatel in Poland is like a fully functioning digital ID wallet right now that supports, a lot of like verifications and workflows. And is also considered like Poland's EUDI wallet. So again, they're going to be updating like the standards and protocols that the wallet supports to conform with EUDI. Others right now maybe don't yet support like live credentials, like the Swiss EID, for example, and some of the other wallets like aren't there yet, but will be there and have been announced as kind of this is the EUDI wallet. It's in development. It's being tested for some limited use cases, and will be live next year. So there's a lot of movement going on here. Expect this to shift around just because every week there's a new announcement about what a country or member state is doing, what the wallet's going to look like. Um, so anyways, we've tried to document as much of this as possible with as much fidelity as possible, but again, there's going to be changes and updates. Um, Let me just take a quick peek here. Um, Awesome. So going into some of the other pieces of the digital ID portal, this is a good source of truth for any of our like clients or partners that are looking at like what is Trinsic support or what are you looking at? What are you planning to support? And then we generally for anything listed here, we have more information about like what would be required for us to support, something like the like Vietnam's EID, for example, right? There's registration requirements. There are other things around there that we can talk you through and information that will surface in the digital ID portal. So you'll be able to kind of self-serve and understand, what the deal is there or what to expect. Um, so that's roadmap. Those are future facing things. To show some of the other views that are available to you within the digital ID portal, we have started documenting thoroughly the provider activation steps for a number of the digital IDs that we support here. So for any providers that require some like additional approvals or activation steps, we'll list out kind of what is required, and then what steps are needed to be taken in order to like activate that either for your verification profile or for a customer's verification profile. Um, so you can look through a number of these and then, learn more just about some of the processes that are, required in order to go live with something like Bank ID Norway, where you have like a fairly strict kind of, or a very strict requirement to have some sort of a bank account in Norway in order to activate it. So a lot of the questions that we get are around some of these providers that are a little bit trickier to activate and just being super clear about what's required. How do you then message this to your clients and relying parties in order to know kind of you know, what the game plan is or how something can be activated. Um, Let me just take a quick peek at the chat. Um, Lastly here, um, yeah, so just a quick question that came in. Is the digital ID portal the best place to find updates on the EUDI wallet support? Yes, yeah, that is the goal, is that you can be able to go into the digital ID portal and get a sense of like what are the wallets that we're tracking, when do we plan to support them? Um, Again, some of that is totally contingent upon like when those wallets will support, remote verification or what the like registration requirements are in that capacity. But yes, yeah, that's the intent, is that this will be the most up to date source of information for questions like that. Um, okay, so last thing kind of within the digital ID portal that we've spent a lot of time updating is details around the various identity providers. So this view kind of has two separate, ways you can look at it. You can scroll side to side. So this is at some level kind of just a fancy spreadsheet that you can organize and sort. So you could sort this like by region. You could sort it by adoption rate. You could filter by the various fields that are returned by a given provider, or sort it by activation level. So any of the fields in here, you can then apply kind of your own view on. So if you're a user like within the digital ID portal, your view is your own. The way you sort it doesn't impact like how your teammate views it or how we view it or something like that. So it's a nice feature. But then when you click on one of these providers, you get this expanded, nice view of a bunch of different details about it, broken down into sections. So you can see kind of the current status of this with Intrinsic, a short description, logo of the provider, kind of what type of ID it has, if there are any relevant like certifications, like if it is a notified EID scheme, or if it conforms like the IAL2 standard, for example. Um, you'll see the relevant geographies, which in some cases is just a single country or a single state even, but in other cases may be relevant to multiple countries. As a bank ID, IDEN is a bit of a funky like adoption metric or coverage metric in that anybody with one of the conformant banks will be able to, authenticate this way and share some information. With something like an EID application, the adoption rate is more of a function of like how many users have downloaded and onboarded into the application. Um, You'll also see other dimensions here, like the supported attributes that are returned, or some attributes are conditionally returned based on, either how the provider is configured or how the user onboarded into the platform. Um, and then, yeah, a number of other, yeah, platform statuses. Folks have asked us a lot about kind of the idea of like biometric verification and like how do we really know that a user presenting this credential is the right user, especially because certain schemes don't make available something like a document portrait or like a photo of the user. But these, the user may have to do a Face ID or something on device in order to authenticate. And that is, a way in which they're presenting and, proving their identity. Um, there are other, yeah, compliance pieces here. Does this provider require approval from Trinsic in order to launch? Does it require a local entity, for example? Are there known like restrictions around use cases, identity switching or others? And then, um, these are all kind of a function of questions that we've been asked by partners over time around who the legal owner of the scheme is, what the data flow looks like when, how data flows between the different, partners in the ecosystem. Um, yeah. Riley, is there anything else that you want to add or like talk about in terms of these views in the ID provider section here?
Yeah, I think conceptually, like you say, Zach, this is a function of like questions that we get asked, right? So we get asked like, hey, I need to do a privacy assessment about this ID provider in order to activate it for me and my customers. Can you give me data flow diagram and, give me, XYZ things, right? And then sort of this is our way of like, answer the question, of course, over email or whatever, where it comes. And then we typically will then go back to this platform and kind of put the answers into the background to the extent that we can, to the extent it's not just a one-off answer, right? But rather that we could generalize the question and provide general useful feedback here. That is the goal. And so the goal is for this to, keep getting better. And don't be surprised if you ask a question and then a week later you see, or a day later, you see that now that question has been answered for 50 digital IDs and is, available to see through this portal here. That is certainly the goal. I would say that the data, is not always perfect, or sometimes there are inconsistencies, or like one field is used in more than one place for slightly different purposes, and so maybe is in one context is used for one thing, and in another context is used for another thing, and therefore like it seems like there's an inconsistency or something, right? Like Zach mentioned that adoption number up above or whatever, right? Things like that are just let us know, ping us, shoot us a note if you notice anything like that, and that's always helpful too, because it's hard to keep everything always perfectly up to date. And then I saw a question in the Q&A about how to get access to this, and the answer is this is all sort of non-public, I guess, documentation. So our docs site is public. This documentation here is information that's only available to, signed customers or whatever. And so we add people to this, right? We can like invite emails to this, and you get a login to this platform, essentially. And we can give, anybody who's interested a login, right? So if you've got sales enablement people, if you have privacy or compliance people, if you have product managers or salespeople who may want to access this stuff directly, let us know and give us their emails, and we can invite them and add them to the portal. That's how we manage it. Maybe the last thing I'll say, Zach, is in the upper right-hand corner of this IDEN thing, you see that print button. And I think if you click on that, you can get a PDF or whatever of the content that and share it with, whomever within your organization, if that's an easier route as well.
Nice. Awesome. I think another field that we do get asked about is around branding as well. This is like a big topic. One of the things that differentiates Trinsic is that you're able to brand these providers. So it looks like either like you, the identity verification company, is requesting the data, or in certain circumstances, like your customer. So like a fintech or something like that, the request can look like, hey, X fintech is requesting your data via IDEN or something. So this will enumerate kind of the options of like what branding can be shown. Could you use the Trinsic brand? Could you use you, the customer, the identity verification company's brand, or could you register the end customer and display their brand? And then what is required? What do we require from you in order to like set that up on our side so that we're using the right profile? Um, so anyways, yeah, there's a lot to scroll through here, both kind of, vertically, horizontally to think through. And again, a lot of these have adoption rates, sources, demo videos, ways to test providers, links back to the documentation, supported attributes within this blown up field. And then if you are interested in going, in to one of these specific pieces here and you want to sort it or filter it by only providers that allow like the end customer branding, for example, that is also something that you can do. Any of these things you can apply like a sort or a filter to. Um, awesome. So I think that kind of concludes the walkthrough of some of the roadmap things that we're looking at, digital ID portal. And now I'll kick it back to Riley just to wrap things up, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So again, if you have questions, feel free to start putting them in the chat and we'll get to them shortly.
Great. So last thing I want to say to kind of close us out here is we prioritize our roadmap 100% based on customer needs and asks. So these are a few of the things that we're working on next that have been we've been asked about. And if you are interested in working with us on any of these things or testing them or getting early access to these, let us know. Michael shared this verification profile API today, and that is something that will get better over time. And we have a lot of plans to make that more robust. So I'd love your feedback there. Configuring providers through the dashboard, right? So when you add a provider to a verification profile, being able to specify like whatever the configuration options are for that provider is a big effort. White labeling domains at a deeper level is another thing. More permissioning. Michael showed how you can set permissions based on environments, and there are other scenarios and more complex scenarios where we want to give even more granular permissions. And error outputs and things like audit trails and issue logs and things like that are also on the list. So if any of these things compel you or seem like particularly important for you and you'd like to help shape the form of the solution, let us know, and we'd love to work with you, share with you what we got so far, and get your input on it as we build it out. Let's jump into the Q&A. Maybe as a but I guess before doing that, here's some resources as well. So if you haven't taken advantage of these, hopefully this will be useful to you. The Digital ID Adoption Report that kind of takes a lot of that data from the Market Intelligence Hub, the Digital ID Portal, and puts it into an ebook. Same thing here in the Opportunity Zones, takes that same data and just tries to put it into a specific framing in an ebook that you can share with product people or whatever on your team. There's one specifically on MDLs, and then we do a podcast where we host people in the MDL ecosystem and in the digital ID ecosystems. These are generally people from Bank ID Sweden or the Louisiana DMV or places like that to talk about those ecosystems and explore how to how they did it and how to accept those digital IDs. Cool. Okay, so with that, let's go into the Q&A for a few minutes here, and then we can maybe plan to wrap it up. Let's do 5 minutes, maybe, Zach, of Q&A, and then give everybody 5 minutes to like end at like 5 before the hour.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good.
And Michael, feel free to jump in if there's any of the Q&As that you want to take.
Yeah, I was thinking one of the questions is differences between in-person and remote verification standards for MDLs. This is actually applicable beyond MDLs because a lot of what we see in the when like a government or a state launches a digital ID application, which Trinsic would like aspire to support at some level. Sometimes when it first launches, the only capability supported is having like a digital representation of the document, and there's actually no kind of like safe or protocol based way to have a user share that document in a remote onboarding flow, for example. Um, so a lot of basically all of the mobile driver's license applications right now kind of support this in-person verification when you're going through TSA at the airport. But very, very few of them support kind of a remote verification profile, even though there is kind of an updated standard, and many of them will be adding support and adopting it. There's sometimes a little bit of a lag between like, hey, there's a digital ID out there that millions of people have. Can Trinsic support it? Like, it depends on what that wallet enables for us to like a way for us to actually interface with the wallet or with the underlying credential there. So this is, yeah, I guess something to note. So like we do get a lot of requests for digital IDs, but they may be restricted to like it's only for banks and telcos that are registered within a given country or something like that. So or maybe there is no way to kind of present that credential yet, which is the case for some of the like EUDI precursors right now. Is that there's a way to digitally have a digital representation of a document, but there's no way to securely share that online yet. And those things are developing. So there's a little bit of a theme across there where, in terms of like how the wallets develop and mature. So, anyways, yeah.
Zach, I might saw this one come in here on the announcement from Apple.
Yep.
And I did a LinkedIn post and got my digital ID from Apple recently. So happy to speak to this one. The question is like with the recent announcement of Apple and their digital ID, how will this impact the US market? Yeah, will users be more open to Apple Wallet versus a DMV wallet? So I think there's this interesting dynamic where a lot of the DMV wallets, well, I should say it this way. Um, it is a fairly good user experience to onboard, like as a user, onboard into Apple Wallet, right? Because it's like they're Apple and they do a good job with the UX design and kind of it's all, natively kind of all connected into your device and everything like that. Um, and you don't have to download a new app, but there's not a lot of places where it is accepted. And the approval process that Apple has implemented in order to basically govern who is allowed to request the digital ID from the Apple Wallet is fairly limited, right? They only allow a set number of use cases. For example, they will allow alcohol delivery, but not, nicotine delivery or something like that, right? Like things like this, where it's just like they've just decided they're okay with alcohol, but not with nicotine. Um, and so, and then even to get approval for to do it for something like alcohol delivery, it's like a fairly cumbersome process, takes a lot of time. We've had people waiting for longer than I think anyone would like to admit for approvals from Apple, and or waiting for a long time just for them to come back and ask a bunch more detailed questions about the data flows or something like that. And so it is Apple's being very cautious with who they allow to request access to it. And so I think while people might get these credentials in the wallet, it'll be harder to accept. In the meantime, there are DMV wallets and other digital IDs that are much easier to accept right away. And so I think there's this, there's going to be a balance between it's easy to onboard with Apple, but hard to like actually use it. It's maybe a little less streamlined to onboard with a DMV wallet, but there's a lot more places that will accept it. And hopefully Apple will institute processes that make it easier to get approved for acceptance over time as well.
Yeah, the other benefit of the, DMV wallets are kind of state specific or bespoke wallets is that they can more easily enable other use cases like re-registering a vehicle, ordering a new kind of like license or credential or other kind of functionality that make it easier for the citizen to interact with their government. And they're not kind of limited to like credential types or workflows that are, required by the OS or something like that. Um, so there's, yeah, sometimes some more use cases enabled. Um, this is a quick one. Will Trinsic support the UK Gov wallet if and when it launches? Yes. We're kind of going through the certification process right now to be like a relying party or service provider of the Gov UK wallet, which yeah, will hold like a mobile driver's license, spec compliant mobile driver's license, and hopefully launch early next year.
Not to be confused with the Brit card or whatever, which who knows?
Yeah, yeah. That is a fairly longer time horizon. I think there was a lot of like energy and debate, but I think the time horizon there is like fairly long. But there was already kind of a public, proclamation to digitize entitlements into the Gov UK wallet
Yeah.
by the end of 2027 or something like that. So there's still hopefully something that's, moving more quickly and is a little bit less polarizing, and will be useful soon.
Yep. Good. Well, I think we're at the time we wanted to wrap things up at, and let you get back to or get have a few minutes before your next thing. Appreciate all of you joining. Appreciate the partnership that we have with all of you, and I think I'm really passionate about what digital IDs and this sort of new age of ID verification is going to mean, both for our industry as well as for the world and for people. So, thanks for being on the journey. Let us know how we can be the best partners that we can to you. And if this webinar was useful, I'd love to hear about it and hear what was the most useful stuff so that the next one can be even better. And yeah, thanks again for joining.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.